Welcome to another episode of Boots on the Ground, where we discuss Israel's war, politics, and identity. Today, Ari and I will be talking about the tragic loss of Josh Boone, an IDF soldier whose ultimate sacrifice went officially unrecognized. But first, a thank you to our partners at the Jerusalem Media Group and our sponsors, BeThereIsrael.com. For all your events in Israel, BeThereIsrael.com provides live stream services to all your friends and family around the world so that you can join all your events virtually. And now we need to speak about a personal and heartfelt episode that Ari recorded with Josh Boone. Ari, you interviewed Josh a few weeks ago for episode 21, just before his passing. What can you share about him?
Josh was a true warrior of the Jewish people. His loss it's a personal tragedy for myself, for his partner, for his parents, for his family, for his friends. But it's also on a national level, it's a huge loss for the nation of Israel. He was a man who, from a very, very young age, embodied the ideals of protecting his people. He comes from a line of warriors. His grandfather fought in the Vietnam War. His father works in the police department, serves to protect. His brother serves in the American Navy. His other brother's a police officer, and he viewed it as his role was not to protect his locality, not protect his state, not to protect the country he grew up in, but to protect his home, the home of the Jewish people. He came here, he had to fight to be recognized, as we talked about in the episode I recorded with him, to fight to be recognized, because who's ever heard of a Jew from Boise, Idaho? Now, I'm going to be going there next week, right after this episode is published, and I reached out to the Chabad guy in Boise, because Chabad's everywhere. I was curious what the kosher situation is. And he said there's jokingly 2 kosher kitchens. I'm like, oh, that's surprising. His and his brother's. So that's where I'll be eating dinner. But Josh came from a place where Judaism was something that he suffered from. He embodied the ideals of what it meant to be a Jew, but he got beat up for it on the playground. And it didn't make him hide his Judaism. He just became more and more proud of it. Came to Israel, he served in the army, he was a sniper in Golani, continued to protect the Jewish people in and out of uniform for many, many years. And when the war started, like the rest of us, the first thing he did was join his unit. But he never stopped. Every time we finished, he would just go on. There's always more protecting to do. There are always more enemies out there. And his whole view was, well, I don't have a family, I don't have a wife, I don't have children, my family's not here. Let me go do a little bit more so someone else can go home. So he never put down, he never took a break. 748 days of reserve duty. Sean, we've both done a lot of reserve duty. We don't come close to that number. This war's only been 840 something days till now, 850 days, whatever it is. 748 days and not doing guard duty behind the scope of a sniper rifle. And he was good at what he did. And his enemies suffered because of it. Like, that leaves a toll on your soul at a certain point.
Right. I definitely think from the little bit that I knew about him and what we read and the interviews, he was clearly a very special person. But I want to go back. How did you get to meet this incredible individual who came from, like you said, Boise, Idaho to Israel with a lot of history? How did you two meet, and how did that relationship develop?
Years and years and years ago, when I was still working and volunteering at the Lone Soldier Center, Josh was just another one of the Lone Soldiers. But he was a character he had this goofy smile, this bigger than life laugh. Everything was a hug. And he was one of those guys that you just meet him and he automatically is just your best friend. Even though there was quite a few years between us, he was just a larger than life human. And he was friends with everybody, cared about everyone. I've never met anyone that didn't like him. It was a little bit hard to get along with. He was a gruff guy from Idaho. He fit a stereotype in that sense, but he always had a way of lighting up a room. And even once I left the center and I moved on with life, that was already 8 years ago, there's a number of soldiers that they became like family, where the relationship was more than just some guy that came into the center that I helped. That developed a real friendship, a real closeness. And he was a frequent guest in my home on Shabbatot. When things weren't going so well for him in his life, I'd meet up with him, sit down, help give him guidance, almost like a little brother. And he was just a special guy. He just had that effect on people. And we came when I finally got him to come in to record that episode. He came with his girlfriend, and I finally was like, all right, so when you bringing her over for Friday night, sort of like meet the parents kind of situation. And the plan was for a few weeks from then that they would come over for Friday night dinner, which never happened.
So, I mean, we spoke about right now, you said 700 days of Miluim, which is just unfathomable. I think between the two of us, we can't even get close to that number.
We get close. We hit about 700 between the two of us.
Between the two of us.
Between the two of us, exactly.
You spoke about his motivation to protect the Jewish people. We see a lot of lone soldiers who come from all over the world, but there was something unique in his mission that he always saw there was more work to do, more people to protect. And the idea that he had this warrior culture about him.
So it wasn't so much a warrior culture. Josh would tell the story that his father told him that we're assuming comes from the grandfather. And his father would always tell him, I've heard his father shared this at the funeral as well. I've heard his father say this many times in the past. It's actually one of the first articles I wrote about in my entire life that published in the Jerusalem Report was the sheepdog. Was that the world's divided into three people. There's the sheep, there are the wolves, and there's the sheepdogs. The wolves are the evil people trying to get the sheep. The sheep is the majority of people. And then there are a select few people that are sheepdogs. And you should always want to be the sheepdog, the loyal servant of the shepherd that's always protecting the flock. It never rests. It never leaves the flock alone. It's the first one out in the front of the flock. It's the last one in at the end of the flock, and it's always protecting. And it's willing to give up its own life to protect the flock. But that was Josh. It wasn't so much about being a warrior and killing and destroying the enemy. No, it was all about protecting the nation of Israel. He was a protector. The word warrior serves him a little bit more justice of his attitude, but his motivation was protection, was to protect Am Yisrael.
So the last time you spoke to Josh was possibly hours before. What could you tell us about him just before the tragedy that happened?
So it was a few days before, and towards the end of his last round of reserve duty, he was having a hard time. Listen, 748 days catches up with you. It does something to your soul, not something pleasant. He was having a really hard time, and it was about 2 weeks before his official reserve duty ended. A combination of events led him to be admitted to a care facility, a psychological care facility treating him for PTSD, which for him to admit that he needed help was a really big deal, meant it was really bad, and he was suffering. He was suffering nightmares, he was suffering insomnia, he was suffering flashbacks, and it was catching up with him, and he was getting help. And he sounded good, he sounded optimistic, he was talking about the future. And he ultimately lost his battle with PTSD. As someone who himself, I present a very tough guy attitude when it comes to trauma and psychology and all of that. But I think that there's an awareness that, there's physical injuries. Those are easy to see. A missing leg, scars, those are all visible traits. But there's a lot of damage that's done on a psychological level. Now, some of it is great. There's also PTG, post-traumatic growth. I think this war I've done great. It's helped me realign what's important. It's helped me focus on the things in life that are actually really good for me. And most people have PTG to an extent. But PTSD is a real thing. It leaves real damage to people, and it needs to be treated. And it's very hard for the army, the system, to recognize this. It's not quantifiable. It's not I can look at you and say, okay, you're missing a leg or you have a visible injury. How do you quantify the actions, the chemicals in your brain? How do you quantify what's going on in your mind? It's very, very difficult. Therefore, it's very hard for the system to develop a real plan of how to deal with it.
Right. I think that has been one of the tragedies, but also one of the most important growth points of the army in this war is for the last 70 years, the Israeli army, the IDF, has been almost like a macho army where there's pride in serving. And like you said, you can recognize injury. But this war has finally brought, in a very harsh way, the reality of non-physical injuries, the emotional toll, the mental toll. And my question is, what do you think needs to happen for the army to fully start to recognize the emotional scars and the mental toll that soldiers are facing?
So, first of all, I don't think the Army ever can or will get to a level of recognition, treatment, systemized mechanics the way you can do for physical injuries because there's a level of gray area. You know, someone having a bullet hit their leg and cause physical damage, there's no way of saying, well, because of an accident he had when he was a child, when he was 10 years old, somehow affected the bullet hitting his leg. There's no preconditions, there's no anything before the actual physical injury. And the injury can be very, very tightly quantified. X amount of damage to X amount of tissue. This is after a certain amount of rehabilitation. There's clear statistics. This is what you do to rehabilitate the limb. This is you get movement back. You don't get movement back. It works. It doesn't work. It's very scientific and it's very quantifiable. I don't think we're ever going to reach a stage where anything psychological is as quantifiable as the physical world. I don't think we're capable of that. I don't think medicine will ever be capable of that because there's so many factors that go into it. How you deal with trauma is directly related to how prepared you were for it, which is a lot of what basic training and advanced training as an infantry soldier is supposed to do. It's supposed to give you the tools so that when traumatic things happen, you can handle it more. That's like why in basic training do you never know what's going on? You have no idea what the schedule is. It's called arafel luz, right? Where you have the fog of your schedule.
Right.
You're kept in a situation of never knowing what's next. You never know how much time you have. You're given very short periods of time. They're creating the trauma responses in you and building up that muscle so you can handle trauma. When real trauma happens, you can handle it better. So preparation, people go through pre-army preparation programs, whether it's religious or non-religious mechinot, they suffer lower levels of trauma. Why? Because they're ideologically more prepared and they're more motivated. So there's a lot of things that go into someone's trauma response and how they respond to different trauma, which is why it's never going to be perfectly quantifiable. I think we can tell that where the Army was when I finished my Army service in 2006 till the beginning of the war, the Army made progress in understanding there's an issue, understanding they need to deal with it, and starting to build up the systems for it. But even throughout the different operations that happened that were a week or two long, they were both minimal in their scope and time and minimal in the scope of number of soldiers that took part in actual combat. Most soldiers that served from 2006 till 2023, talking about 17 years, very, very few soldiers actually saw combat in any significant way. Yeah, they were responded to a terrorist attack or whatever it is, but you're talking about very small numbers. So the Army never was forced to deal with the situation because it was always, I could deal with just this one or just this two in a very specific way. I never had to deal with it from a systematic level. From the beginning of the war to today, so now two and a half years later, I think the Army's made light years of progress in both recognizing that there's an issue and developing systems. Anyone who wants help can very, very easily get it. And you can get it in all the different styles and flavors that work for you. Some people want to do talk therapy. Some people want to do EMDR. Some people need to go to closed facilities. Some people want to do, I don't know, all different, ice bath psychology treatments or whatever you come up with. There's a way, at least for reservists, again, it's a little bit different for guys in the regular Army, but for the reservists, it's all available to you. You have a voucher, go use it however you want. And that's the initial care. And there's systems set up for the extended care. The problem comes down to the Army recognizing that psychological injury in the same way it recognizes a physical injury. They're far from it. And I'm not exactly sure. I don't think they're going to be able to do it because it doesn't necessarily happen the same way physical injury happens. It's not like you were on a mission and you got injured. It could be everything was fine. You went home and a month later, someone slams the door and it has some trigger that sets off a horrible flashback that now sets off a whole cascading chain of events that causes a mental breakdown. And now you have to go retroactively to the Army like, oh, this mental injury that I'm having was caused by my Army service from the last year and a half in this war, but it only came out a month later. It starts getting more complicated.
Right. So
they're getting there. They're getting there. They're not there yet.
So there are a couple of there are a couple of things that I think we need to point out. Firstly, this is the first major war that Israel has had that has had extended military service.
Correct.
And that changes a lot of the dynamics. For the first time, we don't only have regular service guys in for 3 years, which is normal, but you have reservists, whether it's fathers and husbands like you or I who are doing 300 plus days, or heroes like Josh who served 700 plus days. That never existed before. And
Right.
in addition to the extended service, it's the extended combat service. You're not just standing doing guard duty for 30, 90, 60, 100 days. You are in an active combat zone for an extended period of time. That is something that until now, the IDF has never had to deal with.
No.
So while like you said, it is light years ahead, unfortunately, the reality is it is all new to the people who are building the systems as well.
Right, but the beauty is that today we're not 100 years ago. Today, we can learn from our near partners and our allies. The American military has basically had soldiers that have been on combat footings for years already, for 20, 30 years. They have tons of research and tons of development also that we can build off of. There are programs in Israel that are working off of American research. Again, getting the Israeli Ministry of Defense to recognize their modalities of treatment as opposed to the Israeli old school talk therapy modality of treatment is very difficult. But there are organizations backed by real research with real experience from abroad pushing that through in Israel. There's I'm hoping to interview him in a few weeks from now when I'm back from the States. There's a startup that's doing actually medical treatment, like pharmacology, dealing with cortisol at the same time in connections with EMDR, which is a form of treatment that I believe is outstanding, which is mainly researched here in Israel for the last 20 years, in combination with like physical activity, like behavioral, cognitive behavioral things, to combine those three modalities together. And they have research that shows real success, not temporary, not like, and it's very quantifiable. Once they get that research through, they can then go to the Ministry of Defense with numbers and show it's quantifiable. We can measure it. We can do blood tests and show different levels of different things. We can show sleep patterns. We can test whatever it is. They're doing it in a scientific way. That's just one group that I'm in touch with already. There's multiple groups like that working in Israel saying, okay, we have 20, 30 years to catch up with the West or the Western world who's been at war. The United States, England, they've had soldiers at war in Afghanistan and Iraq, in other places, nonstop for the last 20 plus years. So there is where to build from. But again, it's Israel and it's bureaucracy. It's a process.
Okay, I want to go back to talk about Josh and his story. You were very involved in trying to get him recognized officially as a fallen IDF soldier. So let's explain, what does that mean? What is the official recognition? What was Josh's situation, and why was there no official recognition for him?
So when he first...
So let's start with, what does it mean to be a recognized fallen IDF soldier?
So being recognized as a fallen IDF soldier, there's three main components. There's the type of burial, whether it's a military funeral or a civilian funeral. There's the place of burial, military cemetery, civilian cemetery. And then there's the entire financial aspect, compensation, financial support to your family or spouse, and then death benefits like, health, life insurance. And then there's other recognition throughout the rest of the lifetime of all those people involved. And then there's also what's called hansacha. How do you say hansacha in English? Remembrance.
Memorial.
Memorialization. So the two ways that the IDF's official memorial goes is there's a plaque on the wall at Har Herzl, the Israel's National Military Cemetery, for every fallen soldier. There's a massive wall, and every fallen soldier has a plaque with his name, rank, the standard information. He's recognized on that wall. And they have a website called Disco, which lists your life story, your biography, your rank, your exploits. And basically every fallen soldier has a page. The Ministry of Defense finished a number of years ago. They went backwards through all the records since 1948 and before that even. And they made a page like that on this website for every single person who's ever fallen in the service of the state of Israel. So that is the official package in its entirety. Now, At first, we had assumed at first that he'd be recognized as a fallen soldier because it was obvious to all of us that were involved. Okay, 748 days of reserve duty, even though it was, and he was in a medical facility from before he finished his army service, his last reserve duty, until the day he died. So we just figured it'd be treated like any other physical injury, where if your reserve duty continues even while you're physically injured in the hospital, like you break your leg and you're hospitalized for 3 weeks, so you transfer from your reserve unit to the medical reserves, so you're officially still a soldier. God forbid something happens to you. A week ago, there was a different soldier, a different reservist, who had a stroke while he was in the reserves, and he was hospitalized, and then he died after his reserves ended. But because he was hospitalized with a medical condition, his reserves continue, and he was buried as the hero that he was. Very, very clearly and quickly, we realized that the Army is not picking up the slack and taking responsibility for this issue. It took a matter of a couple of hours when I realized that his girlfriend Karen is dealing with the civilian police and the morgue, and there's no representative of the Army involved in this at all. The Army isn't taking responsibility here. They're not stepping in right away. And it very quickly occurred to me, wait a minute, his reserve duty officially finished for 10 days beforehand. He's not going to be recognized as a soldier. The Army, as far as they're concerned, washed their hands of him already. And it was sort of like I had that moment of notice where I switched from, okay, now what? Who controls that decision and who can do it, and how do I get to that person? And then, thank God, there was a group of other reservists who were friends with him. There's too many names for me, I'm going to forget someone, but they had already been working in the Knesset through a forum of soldiers with PTSD, working on recognition for PTSD, not connected to the Josh Boone situation, just in general, for trying to get official recognition. And one of them reached out to me when they saw me dealing with something, like, Ari, listen, we already have connections in the Knesset. What do you need? Who do you need to go? There's another person abroad who is unbelievably well connected, who's a representative of the WZO, who's like, Ari, I'm opening doors for you. I'm in America, you're in Israel. Start walking through doors for me. I basically put my whole life on hold at that point. I stopped going to work. I spent the next 48 hours with this group of people on the phone and in the Knesset. We sat down with
the goal of having
the Army recognize him. He served for 748 days. He had a mental injury. It should be recognized. Like, morally, it was 100% the right thing to do. And no one argued with us on that. It took me a day and a half to realize that there's a legal black hole. The law deals with a soldier who's in his service, and the law deals with a civilian. The law was never designed for the reality of today. Listen, I've been out of the reserve duty actively for 2 months, and I'm going back in 2 months. During these 4 months, am I a soldier or am I a civilian? Josh, there's someone who finishes their reserve duty. Do they automatically they automatically legally are a civilian the next day? Your reserve duty ends. The next day you're a civilian. But are you? You could be called back at any moment.
Right.
Like, while we're recording this, there's the whole threat of, renewed attacks in Iran hanging over our heads. Can I really plan for 3 weeks from now? I might be back in reserve duty, whatever it is. Like, am I really a civilian? I'm not a reservist, that's for sure. So the law doesn't deal with that gray area at all.
And that's exactly where he fell.
And that's where he fell into that gray area. And it took us a day. We went from meeting with the members of Knesset and the opposition and the coalition to meeting all the way with the Minister of Defense and the chairman of the Defense and Foreign Affairs Committee, Boaz Bismuth himself. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone thought we should help. We blew up committee meetings, or we wouldn't let them have discussions about a draft law. I'm on camera turning to the Haredi members in the committee saying, I don't know why you would want to draft to an army that in the worst case, I won't even recognize the sacrifice you've given. You can draft, do whatever you want, but then you die, and then you're just insignificant to them. Why would you draft? When you have issues like this hanging over your head, they're fighting to get you to draft. You should be fighting alongside us to recognize them, so when you ultimately do draft, your fallen soldiers get recognized as the level of respect that they deserve and honor. And then
everyone wants to help,
but no one
did.
But no one did, and there were efforts made. Michael Biton, who's in the opposition from Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party, he was extraordinary. He wrote this letter basically laying out the arguments of the case that he deserves recognition and he deserves to be an exception to every rule. for everything he's done. And he got it signed by the ultra-Orthodox, the secular, the left, the right, the coalition, the opposition. There are members of Knesset that won't sit in the same room together that are both signed on this letter that was given to the Minister of Defense. There was across-the-board support at the legislative level. The chairman of the Boaz Bismuth himself stopped committee meetings, sat down in the room. We called the defense minister and the prime minister with us in the room. He's not hiding anything, purely transparent. He was telling they need to do this. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gideon Sar, was dealing with it. The American ambassador, Mike Huckabee, was on the phone, and he's still helping us, reach levels of government that we don't have access to. They were trying, but in the end of the day, there's a time. In Judaism, we want to bury people as fast as possible, as respect for the dead. His parents were flying in from Boise, and I set a deadline that by the time they land in Israel on Wednesday morning, if they haven't recognized him, then we are going to bury him officially as a civilian, and we are going to give him the most honorable and respectful funeral that any soldier has ever received. I don't need the army to show someone I cared about respect. And there was a meeting with an official representative of the army. They created, actually, months ago, they created this thing called the Almoz Committee, Vadat Almoz, which was given the tools for exactly situations like this.
The gray area.
The gray area.
Soldiers that are not quite
they're supposed
there.
So the problem is they weren't given the ability to recognize. They were given the ability to say you can have military symbolism at your funeral. Now, military symbolism at your funeral sounds like, wow, okay, fine. At least he's getting some level of honor. But when we sat down and got the details, it means his commander will eulogize him in uniform. The army will lay a wreath on his grave, and maybe soldiers in uniform will carry his coffin. And then there's a small financial component, a couple of thousand shekels in vouchers for food for the mourning period. That's what was offered. And I looked and his company commander was sitting in the room, and I looked at him and I said, do you really need her permission to eulogize your soldier in uniform? Would you not come to his funeral in uniform just because the army told you not to? And he couldn't answer me because he knew I was right.
Right. I just want to, unfortunately, I went to a number of funerals over the last 2 years. I think it's important to point out that a military funeral in Israel, regardless of who it is a major event with regards to the way the army deals with it. The army has its own Chevre Kadisha. The rabbinate of the army deals with it. The unit deals with it. The military cemetery. It's a massive, massive event and a huge undertaking. So here it's almost like they're giving like a small compensation that.
Well, they're missing the point. The point of there's two reasons to have a military funeral. And this is something I've been trying to tell a lot of the younger guys who are very angry, because in the end of the day, the soldier's dead. His soul is up with God. He's already doing his din v'cheshbon, like he's doing his judgment upstairs. That funeral, while it's showing him honor and respect, because that's his last physical journey in this world, that funeral is for us.
Right.
On the same level that prayer, God does not need our prayers. Right? Prayer is for us, that we internalize what's important, what should be focusing on. By showing the fallen soldier that level of honor, it's teaching us what our ideals are, what we should be honoring, what we should be respecting. It's teaching us as a people, as a nation, what's important. That funeral is for the living people who are watching and who are partaking in it. It's not for the guy being buried. It is a last rites, a last physical journey on this world showing respect, but it's more for us so that we know what's important. So by the army not taking that on, it gave a very, very strong message to an entire community of lone soldiers who took it very personally, where we'll put on the uniform and we're always going to show up for reserve duty. We are statistically more motivated than any other part of the population. But you'll use us and then throw us out like garbage when it's convenient. When it's a little bit hard to bend the rules, you won't bend them for us. That's a big statement that the army made, that a lot of people took very personally. Now, at the end of the day, at his funeral, there were over 300 soldiers in uniform. His commanders eulogized him in uniform. His brothers in arms carried him respectfully. We sang. We gave him the greatest honor, more than the army ever could have given him. We didn't have a 21-gun salute. There were guys that wanted to. I said, I really don't feel like having to police here and having to deal with more police. But we gave him the most honorable send-off a soldier could ever possibly have. Was it as disciplined or as uniform as a military funeral normally is? Absolutely not. But it fit Josh's style. He would have loved the little bit of balagan that everyone was switching off carrying him. Everyone was singing around him as he was carried to his grave, as he was laid to rest. You know, after he was laid to rest and after he was buried, the member of the burial society, the Chevra Kadisha, so they publicly ask for forgiveness from the dead at every funeral. You'll ever notice in Israel that the burial society asks forgiveness from the dead and asks forgiveness from the family, saying that everything we did out of respect for the dead, and we hope we did it well. And if we made any mistakes or we were slightly disrespectful, we're apologizing, asking forgiveness now. And that's the end of it. And they walk away. This rabbi, the member of the Chevra Kadisha that was in charge of his burial, was standing in the middle of a circle of 400 people who were singing Shir HaMa'alot, who were singing other songs from Jewish text, and he was so moved. I can see it in his face. I'm standing 2 feet away from him. And after he finished, before he walked away, he stopped for a minute and he shared that he's buried great rabbis, he's been in charge of funerals, and he's never seen something like this before. He's never seen this level of respect. He's never seen this level of love for a person in all the hundreds, if not thousands, of funerals that he's done. And then he stayed and he sang with us and he sat with us. He didn't just do his job and leave. And it shows the kind of respect that we showed him. We didn't need the army's permission for that. Okay. And in the end of the day, we showed the nation of Israel, this is how you honor people. The army doesn't, if they can't be bothered to do it officially, we're going to do it on our own. And we did.
So I think you've answered what my next question was going to be, is how do we fix the situation? And maybe that's it. We need to take responsibility and take care of our own. But the question is, how can the situation be fixed?
So there's two issues at play. One, I don't think needs fixing. I think Israeli society is very healthy. It knows who needs and who deserves honor and who not. People came to this funeral that have never heard of Josh, that heard the story in the news, that read about it in the paper, because they recognize that this is someone who deserves our honor and respect. Israeli society came out and showed respect. The law has to catch up. We actually started an initiative. It was the day, his funeral was Thursday, it was Sunday. It was Sunday after his funeral was on a Thursday. On Sunday, I sat down with a legal representative and we wrote the draft of the Josh Boone law. I had written it. It's actually Wednesday night. I sat down at 2 o'clock in the morning finally to write a eulogy because his parents asked me to speak at his funeral, not just organize it. And after an hour, I looked up at my screen. I had 8 pages in Hebrew of legal text, and I'm not a lawyer. And my legal Hebrew definitely leaves a lot to be desired. Instead of having a 1-page eulogy in English, I had an 8-page legal Hebrew text for what I would call the Josh Boone law. On Sunday afternoon, I sat down with a legal advisor and I showed her what I wrote and I explained to her the idea behind it to try and close that legal loophole that exists, where it creates and formulates a clear process for recognition on an immediate level that creates the mechanism at a much lower level of command than the Minister of Defense, the closer it is to your service. For example, I'll give one example about the law. What it does is, to get full recognition as a fallen soldier, that means a military funeral in a military cemetery with the financial package involved and the memorialization, right? Those are the 4 components the law deals with, right?
Okay.
In the first 14 days, you finished your military service, something happens in your first 14. Let's say you got a horrible, it's not only for a mental illness, it could be you got a horrible infection, terrible infection that you didn't realize. You went to the hospital 3 days later, and it was so horrible, you got into the hospital and 3 days later you were dead. God forbid.
Okay.
Right? You would be buried as a civilian, and then you'd have to retroactively go prove that the infection you got that was treated by your local medic when you first got it was someone related to the army. But your low-level commanders, the company and battalion commanders, first of all, they're still in reserve duty after you for at least a week. They can pick up the phone and call every single person under their command to you. You're the lowest private. So he can call all the soldiers around you, your commander, your platoon commander. They're all going to answer their battalion commander on the phone immediately. So from the moment of your death, if your family believes it's related to your army service, they can call directly to the battalion commander and say, listen, you need to check right now and find out. And the brigade commander does the check, and the battalion commander does the check, and the brigade commander approves it. And that's it. It doesn't have to go all the way up the chain of command. And then the idea being, as the time from your service gets further out, the higher up the level of change command it goes. After 6 months, it has to go to the Minister of Defense already. And it only gives automatic recognition for the burial, the place and type of burial, and memorialization. The financial component, we left it that it's always decided by a committee at a later date and time, 6 months later in the Ministry of Defense. We take the money out of the picture. Make it, because that's already personal. For some people it's important, for some people it's not, and it's not public. We take the public parts, the parts that are important to the nation of Israel, and we make that immediate, because you can't undo that. We can't dig Josh up now and give him a military funeral. It's not going to work. You can, it wouldn't work. It'd be too little too late. So we're passing that law. I have it, I sent it in for draft work. I should hopefully have it in the next few days. And then in a few weeks from now, we're going to start pushing it through the Knesset.
Okay. Well, this has been a emotionally trying episode. We've spoken about a lot of personal issues. You spoke about a good friend who's no longer with us. Before we close up, I'm going to ask you, people who are listening to us, what do you want them to remember about Josh? And how do you think we can continue his memory appropriately? Take your time. Sorry, I know that was a harsh one.
I want people to remember about Josh that he never said no. It was never too much. That when it came to protecting his people, there was no question. There was no even comprehension that it's something that it can be dependent on, or only if, or it's too much. It was, my nation needs protecting. I'm the protector. Hineni, I'm here. You know, at his funeral, I quoted Tehillim. Hineni lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. The protector. King David's referring to God himself, but the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. He never takes a break. And that's a concept that I think that there's parts of the Jewish people that truly understand that and internalize that. And then there's parts of the Jewish people that there's a dependency. I'll protect, but on my terms. I'll protect if. I'll protect when. And I think that what's important is that the Jewish people is something you protect no matter what. Whether you agree with everything they're doing, whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter. You protect the Jewish people. Everything else we can figure out later. There's no question about that. I think that's the most important lesson that he could teach us. And to get involved, I think that moving forward on February 15th, we're holding a big memorial event for Josh in Jerusalem. I'll publicize the details on my Facebook once they become available. And we set up a memorial fund for him, which is to help support his family at the moment and the needs of his family. And in addition is to help push forward this legislative process. There's expenses involved. There's processes that have to get paid for. And it's to help processes so that Josh will be the case that triggers a repair for all of Israel. Is that while Josh's loss is tragic, and it was a huge mistake made by the system, it had to happen in order so that we see there's a problem that needs to be fixed. And then the Josh Boone law will be on the books of the judiciary in Israel for eternity at that point. It will hopefully a law that will never have to be used, but it will help remind that all the soldiers, everyone, not just the lone soldiers, not just the immigrants, not just this type or that type, but any soldier who falls off the battlefield directly because of their army service will be recognized and honored by the Jewish people.
Well, that's a great way to end. Thanks again to our partners at the Jerusalem Media Group and our sponsors, BeThereIsrael.com. And I encourage you all, after this episode, go back and rewatch Ari's interview with Josh. I'm Israel Chai.
I'm Israel Chai.